Hello everyone and welcome to Blue Tengu's live game development show where we show everything that goes into making a game from concept to completion. If you've ever wanted to make a game, we hope this will help lower the barrier to entry, maybe give you the nudge you needed to try it yourself. Even if you don't want to make a game, we hope you'll find some entertainment value in what we're doing here. All of the information about where you can find us is in the Twitch info down below or in our YouTube profile for those of you who are catching this later. Just in case, we're at www.bluetengu.com. Tengu on Twitter, Facebook.com Blue Tengu Studio, YouTube.com Blue Tengu Studio for those of you watching us on Twitch, and Twitch TV Blue Tengu for those of you who are watching us later on YouTube. If you missed any episodes, you can always catch them over at YouTube, but you shouldn't have any trouble following along, even if you haven't seen them. Just a warning in advance, since starting this morning, I've been having a lot of trouble maintaining a stable Twitch connection, so it could just keep dropping again and again. Don't know what's going on. Twitch has been kind of spotty on me lately. Hopefully it's okay for now, but, you know, it could just keep giving me those reconnected things just like it did now. So the live show is going to be kind of off today. Hopefully you're catching this on YouTube where you don't get any interruptions. For those of you watching the live stream, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it because it's just Twitch's thing. But for those of you who haven't seen the show on Twitch or YouTube before, my name's Eric. I'm a game designer living in Japan who's trying to show you everything that goes into making a game for about 2 hours a week, including all the ums and ahs and awkward debugging moments. The reason I'm showing it all as opposed to making the game first and scripting out a rehearsed tutorial is because I want to lower the barrier you feel about making a game, and I hope inspire you to go out and try it yourself, because it's not that hard. Thank you to everyone who dropped by last week, and to all of you who watched the video on YouTube. For those of you here with me on Twitch, feel free to drop suggestions or ask me questions at any time. May not be able to answer them right away, but I'll try to get to them. And if I can't, please send me a private message here or leave a comment on our site or YouTube video, and I'll do my best to address it next time. If any of you are out there making something and you don't mind showing it off, send me a link. I'd like to see it. Anyway, at this time every week for 2 hours, I come on Twitch TV to work on the game Project Spaghetti, which is going to be a top-down 2D cowboy shooter where the bullets fired bounce around the screen with a pinball mechanic. Last week I finally made things a little more dangerous for the player by giving the enemy cowboys the ability to shoot, which is a great start, but not enough to make them much of a threat because they don't move. To make them more dangerous, they have to move. Last week, I estimated the task of getting the bad guys moving to take more than 2 hours, and that's because movement can be a very tricky thing to implement. There's probably a lot of things I haven't thought of that I'm going to run into when I start doing it. If, for example, the stage didn't have any obstacles, like any of those barrels or whatever, and the goal of the enemy was just to run into the player, then it would be pretty easy, because I would just have them find the player and move towards that every step. But unfortunately for the difficulty of my task, but fortunately for the gameplay and making it more interesting, things aren't that simple. At the moment, I have barrels in the way, which the enemy will have to avoid, and because the enemy has guns, they have no reason to want to run into the player. They're not trying to stab them or something. All they're looking for is to get within a reasonable range and shoot. So to do that, they're going to need a more complicated destination than just the player, one. And they're going to need some artificial smarts to get around the collision on the stage. They're also going to need some, probably, line of sight things too as well, to avoid shooting themselves, which requires making sure they have a clean line to the player before firing their guns. But I can make that a different task, because doing all of those things might be a little tough in one episode. Now, I mentioned I need a more complicated pathfinding algorithm than just run at the player in a straight line. In games, there are a couple of ways to go about it, depending on how much the maps, specifically the collision and the kind of routes you have, change, and how much processing power you have available. In this case, I'm going to use one of the more popular pathfinding algorithms, which is called A*, mostly because GameMaker comes built in with support for it, saving me a lot of time implementing my own pathfinding algorithm. And it's probably more efficient to use the one that's in GameMaker because they've probably optimized it, etc. And A* is definitely fine for what I need. By the way, if you're working with Unity, for example, and you're doing a 2D game in that, or 3D game's fine too, and you don't have Pro, because I think Unity Pro does come with its own pathfinding stuff, there's a great add-in you can use, and I've used it in the past, called the A* Pathfinding Project. I don't remember the name of the person who made it, but if you just search for A* Pathfinding Project, you should find it. There's different versions of it, but there's a free version, and it's enough to get your player moving around in 2D or 3D space. And, if I was worried about efficiency and processing power, I might be better off going with a pre-calculated route map or an algorithm that doesn't need so much calculation, like A* does. But the game is 2D, and there's a reasonably small set of enemies, so it's not worth the extra hassle of doing something customized for it. What I was saying about a route map is because those barrels, for example, are fixed. You know, if the barrels were moving around, then yeah, you need to use A star because every step they'd have to recalculate routes and everything else. But you know, if I know that these barrels aren't going to move and I don't have to worry about other collisions that are moving around, you know, like player and enemy or whatever, then I could just say these are the places that you could move, or these are the patterns that you should take. Like if you come to this spot, then choose one of these paths, and you know, that'd be a lot more efficient in terms of processing power. A little less variation, but you know, there are other options than just A star. You know, wherever you look, you always see A star, A star, A star, but there are other options depending on what you need. So what is A star? Well, I don't really need to know how it works to use it because GameMaker handles all of it for me, but you know, because I do happen to know how it works, it's worth going into it in case you guys out there make a game and need to, you know what's best for you, your situation. There are other pathfinding algorithms like, you know, the one that used to be the big one before A star, you know, Dijkstra's back in the 60s. And the whole alphabet of, you know, you've got B star, D star, and other things like that. And other algorithms out there too that you know fit situations better. So it's definitely worth looking at pathfinding algorithms. But A star seems to be the most popular for a lot of games, and for a good reason. You know, basically, here's how it works. When you're working with an open space, A star starts. You have to give it a grid, basically. You know, if you have like nodes and you're just, you know, moving from this node to this node, then A star works a different way. But you know, usually in a game space, you have a kind of an open space, and it's just, you know, A star needs points to work with so it can calculate distance and everything else. So what you do is you take that open space and you divide it into grids. The grid doesn't have to be squares, it can be anything, because all A star needs to know is where you are, like, well, for example, where you are now, and the places you can go, and how expensive it is to go to those places. So you could use hexagons or triangles, or I don't. Circles might be a little tricky, but you know, you could use whatever you wanted to. But you know, this is a 2D game, and I don't need anything more complicated than squares because it'll just make the calculations more difficult anyway. But when you're making that grid, the finer the detail of the grid, the better the route that you're going to get. But the more processor intensive finding the route becomes because you have many more things you have to check along the way to get the optimum route. In general, it's best to find the roughest grid you can get away with without having enemies look unnatural. In my case, I think it should be fairly easy to figure out the grid because I've got a fixed size of player and a fixed size of like those barrel objects and things, so I don't need too thin of a grid to have it looking natural because, you know, for example, if I had a really oversized grid or something like that, you know, an inefficient grid, you know, I'd have a barrel sitting here, but rather than having the enemy move like this, you know, the enemy might move like this or something. It all comes down to grid size. But anyway, once you hand A star a grid, it can start its work. It works by adding to and referencing two lists. There's an open list of places the AI can potentially move. In other words, a list of things it still has to calculate or check, or potentially calculate and check, and a closed list of places the AI doesn't need to worry about anymore because it's either already calculated them or it's already figured out that it can't move there. So obviously, if the AI is trying to get somewhere, the place they start is the first spot in that grid that goes in the closed list because they, you know, otherwise they would just be standing still if they wanted to move there, and there's no point to that. So, and the first candidates for that open list are going to be all of those grid squares next to that starting position. So if there's no collision or anything around the player or the bad guy, then, you know, that's going to give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 possibilities. Then to try and figure out the best route, the algorithm calculates the cost to move to any of those spots in that open list. Then estimates the cost from that spot to the final destination. This is where it kind of gets a little tricky, but you know, if you start here and your destination is, let's see if I can get my fingers in the camera here, the destination's up here, And your first open spot is here. This is probably going to be the best one. You know, if you're a human being, you know that it's the best one. If you've got all the possibilities and you're trying to get to this destination, it's going to be the best thing to try and move towards that destination. Computers obviously can't intuit the way humans can, so they need to be told what to do. And so how you do that, how you emulate basically what humans are intuiting in like half a second or whatever, is, you know, why is this spot better than these other spots in general? Because it's closer to where you want to go. The computer doesn't know that until you tell it that. Unfortunately, there could be obstacles along the way, so it's just an estimate for the computer. Like if you have a giant, you know, block or something in the way, you know, that's something it'll have to figure out later. But in most cases, it's going to be best to move, you know, closer and closer to the destination, right? Sounds obvious, but it's not too obvious to a computer, which is why it needs an algorithm. So it estimates the cost from that spot to the final destination and adds that to the cost of moving so far. So if you've moved 2 spots, it takes that cost and adds it to the estimated final, you know, cost or distance usually to the destination. But, you know, the cost is usually distance, but it doesn't have to be. You can adjust it if you need to. Say, for example, if you have like water tiles or something and it slows your player down or slows your bad guy down or something, then you can up the cost for that because it'd be more efficient to avoid those slowdown tiles and go around them. So, you know, that's kind of how you can work with A star for making the enemy seem smart. In my case, there's no slowdown tiles yet, anyway, so it's just a matter of distance in my case. One thing I'm not sure how GameMaker's algorithm does it. Maybe it already does it, calculates it for me, but a diagonal move is going to be more expensive than just a horizontal and vertical move in general, because it takes a little longer to move here than it does just up. So that may be adjusted in the costs or not. But anyway, the algorithm tells us to pick the cheapest spot and then just keep repeating the process. You know, once it runs into a wall, for example, then it starts spreading out from there. If you look it up on Wikipedia, for example, the A-star pathfinding algorithm on Wikipedia, they have a great picture that actually shows how the algorithm reacts to when it hits a wall, because it kind of hits it and then it sends out 2 more, 2 more, 2 more until it finally gets around it and then gets to its destination. This differs from like Dijkstra's algorithm because I think Dijkstra's, I'm trying to remember, but I think it works more by just like shooting out lines and stuff, so it's less efficient. It's not trying to kind of worm around things, it's just kind of brute forcing it. It's still more efficient than, you know, just calculating everything and getting the best spot, because in a small grid that's fine, but if you have a big grid, your processor is going to die on that, especially if you have like a 3D first-person shooter or something. It's definitely going to die on it. But that's enough about the algorithm, because like I said, GameMaker looks like it handles all of that for me when I looked it up, so I should be able to leave all of the heavy lifting just to the game engine. One thing I do want to do when I jump over to Trello where I have my task list is I'm going to want to break that huge task down into 3 steps, and hopefully today I can get through 2 of those steps. If I can't, you know, I can't, because to be honest, I've never done pathfinding in GameMaker, so, and I know it's a complicated subject because I've dealt with it before. Never know what kind of surprises are going to come up, and it totally depends on how GameMaker handles it and how much it does for me. So, you know, I could get absolutely nothing done this episode, which is possible. I mean, learning, you know, I'll learn, but, or I could get everything done. Who knows? It really depends on what GameMaker does for me. So I'm going to try to split that task down. Right now the task is just get the enemy moving, but I probably want to split it into 1, find a destination, because I don't want the enemy to just run at the player or try to run into the player. And I thought about this one and I thought, probably the easiest way to do it, rather than trying to be fancy with picking, you know, the points I want to move the enemies to, is to have them run at the player and then just stop when they're within a certain distance. So they'll keep tracking the player, but, you know, they won't make those final couple of steps and get too close. You know, I could probably, hopefully, stop the pathfinding when they're close enough. I'm also going to have to actually make them move to the destination, which is probably the fattest of the tasks. That's going to require, creating the grid and starting them moving across it. Other tasks, actually there's 4 tasks, because I have to have them avoid shooting each other, because otherwise they're going to look really, really silly if they've got, 2 bad cowboys and one just shoots another one in the attempt to get to the player. Maybe it's comical, maybe it's okay, but probably not for the game. Probably not a good idea, but I can leave that task for later. Also going to have them dodge bullets and stuff, and I'm also going to have them try to find a line of sight to the player too when they're shooting. It's not quite a movement problem, but it can be related to a movement problem because hopefully they're trying to move into a position where they can shoot the player. But those are the tasks I need to kind of break down, so let's get to it, because this is going to be kind of a meaty episode, I think. Let's see. First, what do I want to do? I want to go over to Trello first. And right now, I've got, let's see, the bad cowboy action movement task, which I want to break down first. So let's do bad cowboy action, find goal, bad cowboy. I think I already have, yeah, bad cowboy action dodge, so I've already got that covered. Action, check line of sight before shooting, because I've already got the bad cowboy shooting, but I need to check to make sure that they're actually aiming at the player when they shoot. Well, I've got the aiming at the player, but I mean I have to check to make sure that they've got a clean line of sight to the player before they shoot. So that could be an hour-long thing in itself. So the check line of sight before shooting thing, I'm going to move this off just to the main task list. Finding goal, that's going to be probably the first thing I have to do, because I have to give the pathfinding algorithm something, but I think I want to start getting the pathfinding working before I worry about that too much, because like I said, maybe I can get away with just stopping it when the enemy gets within a certain range of the player. Move towards the player in general, but just stop at a certain distance, so maybe I can get away with that. For town level win condition, I think I'm going to want to do that at the same time as I do that town level enemy pattern. Once I figure out how many enemies I want to come out, how I want them to come out, then I can kind of worry about a win condition. I just had it this episode because it'd be a small task, but. So first thing is bad cowboy action movement. Let's get this thing moving. Alright, so first thing, let me show you where I'm at now, obviously, before I get started on anything. The enemies are a little violent here. They definitely like shooting at the player, but as you can see, they're not moving, and that's what I need to fix. And they're going to need to avoid these barrels when they're moving towards the player. So that's that. Let's see, I did have some notes, because I didn't want to take too much time figuring out how pathfinding works while I'm trying to do the game itself. So this is all of that. Stuff that I looked up, basically. So in the step portion of the game, create a grid, add instances that it has to avoid to the grid, pick a path, and start them on their path or into their path. So those are the things I'm going to kind of need to remember here. Let's see what I can get away with. Probably going to want to keep that window at least somewhat visible until I figure this out. So first up, let's see, we've got my sprites, but I probably won't need to worry about those this time, so I'll keep that folder closed. Backgrounds, I won't need to worry about that this time, so I'll keep that folder closed. Scripts, probably won't need to worry about that. Objects, probably will need to worry about that. And rooms, probably need to worry about that. So, since all of this is for the enemy, I could, for example, put MP grid create in the enemy step. The only thing is, the grid itself doesn't need to be recreated for every enemy, every step, because it's just one grid. It's that whole MP grid path thing that's going to have the start point and the end point, so the grid itself should only exist at one time, otherwise I'm just kind of wasting processor power. Not going to matter on the PC, but if I did, for example, port this to iOS or something, probably want to not just be throwing processing power around. So let's see, MP grid create, what would be a good spot for that? Seems like this is probably a good spot. I do have the system object that exists in the room. It's just, it doesn't show up in the room, but I think it exists in the room. Okay, and I think that's where the grid should go, because there's only one system object in the game, and it's not related to like the player or anything else, so I don't have to worry about my grid just suddenly vanishing if something happens to the player object. System makes sense. It's a system thing, so it should go in here, theoretically. So, and actually, I don't think I need to create this every step, do I? Because nothing's really moving around. And the grid, you know, in terms of MP grid add instances, that may need to be every step, but maybe this all can go into the create thing. Let me try it in create first, because if I can get away with just doing all of this stuff once, that's going to save me a lot of processing power. And GameMaker, helpfully, has given me all of the MP grid stuff. So here's create. X start, let's see, that's the upper left corner. Let's see, I think I already have in my notes that I was going to divide it up into a certain thing. Let's see, how big is my room? 640 by 480. Let me take a look at that map, actually. Well, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, okay. And then I actually don't need to create a grid for all of this wasted space up here, because nobody should be moving up there either. So my actual start position should be let's go 150, 5 to 150, 10 to 150. Let's go with 10 to 150. So I can save a little bit of processing there. 640 by 480. Let me just keep that in mind. I don't want to make anything to a specific resolution, but I do want to kind of keep that in mind when I'm thinking about ratios and whatnot. Let's see, what's a fair one? 32 is fair. 12 is probably going to be a little bit too wide. 24. Let's try 24. And you can see at the bottom of the window it does kind of show you what the other function or parameters inside of MP grid create are. We've got left, top, H cells, B cells. Right now it's cell width and cell height. Since I'm dividing room width by 24 and room height by 24, I want that to be 24 and 24 as well. Also, I can't just divide room width. Because I've got this. Maybe I should just keep this at 0, 0, because it's not going to be that much extra processing work, and I'll just add those walls, those outer walls, as one of those instances that sits on the grid, so it kind of acts like a barrel would. It'll keep my calculations simpler, and if I want to change, that later, I don't have to worry about it. So let's try this for a starting point. And I do want to actually give this a variable name, so let's call it room grid. Okay, so what's an object name? I think that just have it as barrel. And let's see, the precision thing, I looked it up. Precise is in GameMaker, you can either choose to have precise sprite collision or you can just have kind of a generic collision. I don't think it's going to matter that much, so I'm just going to go with true for precise collision checking. What other objects do I have here? Border. Border's the other one. Player, border, bad cowboy. Absolutely no idea whether this will work or not, but hopefully it does. Oop, 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 oop. Okay, so that should theoretically anyway give me a grid with all the things that are closed on it. And that's all I can get away with doing in create. Let's get rid of this. Now, let's see, begin step. Now for this cowboy, I think I can get away with that. System dot room grid. No, I guess I couldn't get away with all of that create. Let's see. Because actually, I need one more step in here. And I think I made a mistake on that. Because it just says ID, so it's like, which ID is it? I think it is just the path that goes in here. Let me check my notes and make sure here. So I've got MP grid create. So I've got room grid is that. Enemy path, path add instances to the enemy path. Okay, so I think all of this actually needs to go into that enemy step. So it's only the grid creation I can get away with in system. Let's see. I could probably put this into the bad cowboy creation. Kind of hard to tell how to divide this up, but I think that'll do it. Yeah, when it adds an instance, I wonder if GameMaker keeps track of where that object is when it's calculating the grid path, or if it only does it every step. I don't think I can get away with this in Create, actually. So let's, just to be safe, let's pull it out of Create. And just keep it all in here to make sure it works, and then maybe I can start fiddling with it, breaking as much as I can out into Create later. Get it working first. MP grid path, start. Alright, we've got the rim grid, we've got the enemy path. X start is just going to be where the bad cowboy is now. So that's just X, Y. And the goal is going to be player X, player Y. At least, you know, the simplest way to do it is just to have them go towards the player anyway. Let's see, what else do I need? That's my Y goal, and then allow diagonals. Yeah, I guess I want to allow diagonals. Yeah, oh, we'll see. And path start, path. So this is enemy path. The speed I want them to go is just going to be whatever this bad cowboy's move speed is. I think I have a variable for that somewhere. Maybe. Oh, well, I haven't had them moving yet, so obviously they don't have a move speed at this point. So whatever I do for the player, PL base speed. So I want to do that for the bad guys too. Give them some sort of base speed to work with. So EM base speed, and do I want them to move as fast as the player? Let's give the player at least some edge. So let's move these guys. You know, if the player's moving 2, they'll move 1.5. We'll see. We'll see how fast they move. I don't want them to move as fast as the player, so the player can at least feel a little bit like they're special. And have, you know, somewhat of an advantage. So that's my speed. EM speed. EM base speed, I should say. Into action. If they do reach the end of the path, you know, probably, ideally, I would want them to shoot. But for now, I'm just going to have them stop. Continue from start. Continue from current. Maybe I'll just have them stop. And let's see. And to stop them before they reach the player, I would also want to create a condition where if they're too close to the player, to not have them go any faster. So I need to look that up, actually. GameMaker, calculate distance between two objects. Google already knows what I want to look up. So heading over to the Yo-Yo Games forum. Obviously a mistype there. I think GameMaker has a function for this. I don't need to make a new one, do I? Yeah, okay, there we go, distance to object. Alright, so just distance to object is what I need, I think. If the distance is less than... What is a good distance? So I don't want to make this fixed, I want to keep it somewhat to a resolution. Rim Since I had the grid at 24, let's do 48. Actually, 12. So if they're closer than that, and end the path. Well, let's see what happens. I'm sure it'll give me some kind of error because I've added a lot of script there. And I don't want to have them moving while they shoot. So, if EM shoot is 1, let's give them a little bit of a cooldown. Actually, let's keep that outside of the script so it's easier to see that I'm doing that. I'm probably adding too much logic for my own good before getting this thing tested, but this is something I know will come up. If EM shoot is 1, then I don't want to be doing this. Okay, let's see what happens. I'm sure, guaranteed that it's not gonna work because that never happens when you're working with code. Okay, room size. Which one did it have the problem with here? Wrong number of arguments to function or script. Distance to object. That's right, so it's probably just room size then. If distance to object player is less than room size divided by 22, is that the right name? Oh, room width. Bleh. There's no such thing called room size. Alright, room width. Could go with height or whatever. It doesn't matter. I just want to have at least a kind of a something that's related to the room size. It doesn't have to be precise. Just as a base starting point. Alright, let's see what happens now. I don't know what arguments. I am using distance to object right, aren't I? Let me double check that. That's actually kind of helpful. I should remember that show message. Yeah, it's not that side of the equation that's having the problem. Let's just try making it simple. If less than 10. Line 7. Oh, it's line 7 that it's having the problem with. Okay. No, never mind that stuff then. Room width. Why did it shoot me to line 8 when it was having a problem with line 7? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something, but... Okay, end action 0, and I forgot to do the absolute thing. Let me look that up, actually, before I make a decision on it. Path start, game maker. Oh, I think I'll just go with true, because I don't think I want anyone moving backwards. Hopefully I understood that meaning correctly. Okay. Well, at least it compiles. Whoa, 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 whoa. Well, alright, that kind of worked. Kind of in terms of once they got to where they needed to go, they suddenly appeared in the upper left of the screen, but I was surprised to actually see them moving. That was quite interesting. And they continued to shoot at the player even though they were all clumped together, so they died for me. That was nice of them. But obviously that whole if they're within a certain distance of the player, stop into the path thing is just like resetting them to some random location. So that's the thing I need to fix. In terms of swarming the player, that works. They are very, very, very fast though, so I need to calm them down a little bit. Let's lower that speed even more. Bad cowboy. But I'm very, very happy because that was that was much, much, much farther than I was expecting to get on my first shot here. Let's just even go 0.5. Let's see what that is. So props to GameMaker for adding enemy movement extremely easy. That was awesome. Let's see. Path start, pace speed, yeah, that's fine. If the distance is that, then path end. So this path end is not working the way I expect it to. Let's see what that means. End the following of a path for the current instance. You know what? Path speed might be the thing to change. Let's just try that. If path speed. Set the speed to 0 to stop them on the path, and let's see if that doesn't reset them to the upper left corner of the screen this time. Yep, exactly. So now I've got creepy bad cowboys that are just slowly inching towards the player, shooting at them. In terms of speed, that's fine, but they are having a little problem with these barrels. So whatever is going on, the barrels are not showing up on their pathfinding. For whatever reason, they're able to skip these barrels entirely, which is not what I want. So to be honest, it's like, what is the pathfinding doing? Maybe because it's MP grid add instances. If I just pass it barrel, it's trying to think of the class. And these barrels that are out here now are specific instances. That may be why the enemy's getting confused and just running through them. So, let's see. Yeah, now the problem becomes, how do I add these barrel instances to the path? That is a problem I cannot solve on my own. Let's see if I can find someone who has done this before. MP path. What was it? Add? MP grid add instances. Let's go outside of the GameMaker forums and see if someone else has an answer. Well, let's see, that's no good. For some reason, I've got someone's bug report on the internet. I guess they're just doing this public, which is kind of cool, actually. It's actually very cool. Yeah, view status public. Go, yeah, awesome. Whoever Piotr and Chris Harrison are. Props to them for putting all of this stuff up on the internet. Yeah, wall seems fine. Someone else having trouble, that's good. Not for them, but for me, if they have my answer. Oh, maybe it's just a grid size problem or allowing diagonals or something like that that's causing my problem. I don't know. I got them moving fast, but this is gonna be a little tricky to get past, isn't it? Tree 1, tree 2. Oop. Yeah, I've been reading Conan the Magnificent and Conan the Warrior. I accidentally clicked that, but yeah, for another project, since that's a fun thing to talk about. For another project, I've been trying to go through a lot of like Golden Age, you know, classic, pulp fiction. So, everything from Conan to, just anything that was in like Weird Tales or any of those things to kind of get a feel for it. And it's actually very interesting because while I read this, I guess I'm just going to go off track. So, um, nothing to do with game development. So, allow me this aside. But what's interesting is if you read like the Conan stories, you think of Conan the Barbarian from the movie, which is the Conan in my head, kind of a quiet, badass character. But, the original Conan in the stories is almost more like a James Bond kind of character, which is very interesting. And just the way different people handle Conan is actually very, very interesting. So if you ever have time, read, the original Howard stories from the 30s, and then read the Robert Jordan stories and kind of contrast the Conans and then rewatch the movie or whatever. It's actually very interesting to see how fiction has evolved over the years. Sorry, I'm a scenario writer, so I get off on story tangents really easily. Let's get back to what I actually need to do here instead of avoiding the problem. So what I was thinking was, is this what I need to do? Like barrel 1, barrel 2, barrel 3? So maybe I need to figure out how to get an instance. Instance ID. Okay, well, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try going through and adding instances and see if it changes. If it doesn't change, then that wasn't the problem in the first place. So let's go back to Bad Cowboy. Actually, first I'm going to need the instances. So this ID should theoretically be somewhere. There it is. Oop, oop. Guess I need to put that in my notes. All right. Let's see. One of these barrels anyway is inst 236 33962. Really don't want to be doing it this way because I won't be able to freely add barrels and have them figure it out. But I just want to see if this was the problem. Actually, that's the same instance. What? Oh, because it's in the back. No? Oh, because I haven't clicked on it. No? Well, why can't I click on it? Oh, because the border is in the way. Alright, alright. Wow, that's annoying. Let's see, is there... How do I get to the objects underneath the border. No, I don't want to be doing that. Fine. Alright. Let's do it this way then. Well, I guess we'll need the instance for the border anyway. I don't even need to click on them. Alright. BA4 80CEA inst 824 16C45 D6AB0F. There's absolutely no way this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because Game Maker is usually pretty good about making things simple, and it makes absolutely no sense that they would make you do it this way. So obviously there's a bug in my program, but I just want to make sure the bug is not this before I start looking at other things. I'm not going to worry about enemies running into each other. This is enough for now. Alright, well, let's undo, if it lets me undo it. Nope. Alright. Fine, fine, fine. Hopefully that's where it was. Undo only, yeah, wow, undo only undoes one thing. That's rather inconvenient, actually. I hope Game Maker does something about that. Let's see, begin step. Add instances. You know, maybe it's just this true-false stuff that's causing the problem. But I'm not going to worry about it. And when I add an instance ID, do I need that inst in front? Seems like the way they're referencing instances, they're just doing it without the inst in front. So I'm going to get rid of that. They're not showing up as red, which is a little disturbing. D6 AB0F86. Yeah, I recognize that first one, but it's not recognizing these other ones. What the heck, let's just try it. Symbol expected. Alright, well that's just not working at all, so... You know what, I'm going to take my quick break here, and maybe think about it a little bit. Let me make sure it's still working. Because, as you can see, the problem is the bad guy... they did that jump thing again for some reason. Not sure why they did that. Did I change something? That was weird. It was working just fine before, but then all of a sudden, now it's going back to the whole jump around stuff. Wow, what is going on here? Good place to take a break. Okay, well, I will be right back then. Probably 3 minutes or something, and then I'll get back to debugging this. So jump off the desktop there. And I will see you in a couple of minutes. For those of you on YouTube, I'll just show up in like half a second or whatever. So see you in a few. As it was before the break, I was having a problem getting the enemies to work right. It seems to be a path-finding grid problem. Let's jump straight to it and see what we can do. So once again, that problem is this. Well, that's another problem actually. One, for some reason the enemies get confused and then they just warp to the upper left. The other problem was that they were going right through barrels and stuff. I am going to just try something here and move that room grid. As inefficient as this is, I'm going to move that into here just to see what happens. And I'm going to do that first because I don't want to change two things at once because then I won't know which one did what. I'm going to move the grid creation into here. And they were doing so fine there for a second, but now they're just like disappearing for some reason. They were not doing that the first time I did this. So it's really, really, really weird. Because I don't think I changed anything. Did I? Let me just comment this thing out. Was it the speed? Changed the speed, but they were doing fine. Let me change this actually to absolute false and see what that does as well. At least they're not warping around. When I moved the grid creation into the step, suddenly they were having a lot of problems. So let's move that out into create. See if that helps. Or see what it does anyway. Okay, they're moving as normal. They each have their own grid. They do seem to be coming right through the barrel. Yeah, they are just completely ignoring that collision. But at least, I figured out the problem where they were warping. That's one problem out of the way, which is good news. So I don't think it's that. Let me try fiddling with some of those true falses in there just to make sure, because I could be misunderstanding what they do. When I changed absolute to false, that seemed to help. Let's not allow diagonals and see what that does. distance might be too small. Oh, I don't even have the distance code anymore. So something about not allowing diagonals just completely confuses them, so that's probably not what I want to change. Let's try changing this to imprecise. See what that does. Best way to learn how these functions work, I guess. Oh, that doesn't make a difference at all, actually. I'm not sure why these guys are stopping either. Like, they all stop all of a sudden. It's really, really, really weird. There's a lot of weird things going on. Got them moving quick, but figuring out why they're not moving properly is probably going to take me the rest of the episode. Maybe a little bit beyond that. Let's see, I think I need help on this. Game maker. Path example. I don't think I want to just look at YouTube. Actually, instead of path, let's do path finding. This game maker also has paths, which is more like a fixed path. And that's not what I want to do, because I want them to react to where the player is. No, don't want to do that. Everyone's got these tutorials as downloads. That's not what I want. Maybe I should just look up the function name. Let's try that. Yeah, it says for MP grid add instances, it marks all cells that intersect an instance of the indicated object as being forbidden. So I am using add instances properly because I'm adding the barrel object, so all instances of barrel should be on that grid. Also, you can use the keyword all to indicate all instances of all objects. That actually sounds kind of interesting. Let's just see what that does. And I also noticed something else. It won't help me with my problem, but I have the precise set to true, but I'm not using precise collision checking for any of these sprites, so that shouldn't work. Now they just don't move, so that's no good. So I definitely don't understand all. And they're still avoiding the barrel. Is my grid too small? That doesn't seem like it would matter. Alright, here we go. We've got a debug function, so let's use it. That is exactly what I want to be doing. Alright. Well, let's bring this back first. I don't think this matters. Let's bring that back too. And let's draw that path, or that grid. Let's see what it looks like. Do I need to do that in the draw function? Alright. Let's see. Add events. Draw. Draw step. Maybe I just forgot the semicolon, but okay, so theoretically that's what it looks like to the enemy. It should be fine for the enemy. Why would they be moving into those forbidden spaces? There's something about this path start. Maybe I should pull this out and move it into create first. Let's see what that does. And I should probably also turn in the debugging stuff off too. So let's turn that off. There's also something weird going on with that, where it seems like they're leaving a trail of places they can't go. That's probably something that needs to be done as well. No, now they just don't exist. Alright, well, let's delete this, since it seems to be having trouble with an empty draw event. Okay, I need to stop them shooting because they're shooting each other too much. Let's turn that off for now. what do I need to do to turn this off? Is there a way to comment out in here? Alright, fine, I'll just do it the manual way, if true, or if false. Because false is never going to be true, so that means it should never execute these lines. Because I'm making it harder for myself to debug this by having enemies shooting, so let's not have them shoot. Wow, now they're just really going crazy. What are they doing? Wow. Okay, that made no sense. What did I change? Is it this? Hmm. Maybe something about having it in here is weird, I don't know. Maybe this shouldn't be in begin step either, I don't know. Let's move this part of it out into step. I don't think it'll make a difference, but so they move towards the player. Then they seem to stop. And I'm not sure why they're stopping all of a sudden. Like, they get really confused, and then they start moving again, and then they stop again. This is the weirdest bug ever. And they go through the collision anyway. I mean, about the only thing they're doing right is when they are moving, they do move towards the player and stop when they're a certain distance away. But then there's these weird instances where they just stop moving altogether. And it's not executing any of this stuff, so it's not like EM shoot's getting in the way. Yeah, now I'm just kind of confused here. Do I need to do this stuff in the step, or do I need to do it in create? Fortunately, GameMaker's tutorial page is not that helpful. And I'm sure the tutorials out there for download are helpful, but yeah, again, they don't explain where you're supposed to put these things, so it's no good. MP grid add instances, maybe that's the problem. Maybe you use that once and it overwrites it with something else. So let's try just having the barrels and see what goes on with that. That'd be really weird though. Why would you force people to have like a parent object? And it doesn't seem to be making a difference anyway. Because they're still floating through those barrels. Let me just check my barrel collision too. No. Has a collision, that's fine. It is called barrel, that's fine. Okay, at least this is a little more clear on it. Alright, yeah, grid, path add instances. All this should be in the create event. Alright, well, let's just do it as suggested and see what happens. I only want one grid, which is what I originally had. That's definitely true. And apparently I can put the path add okay. Alright, path probably has a different meaning than I was expecting, so path add, let's move all that into create. I can just get rid of this. Delete. Begin step. I can add instances. Out in the creation. So theoretically, based on that tutorial, I should be able to have all this out here. Theoretically, of course. And MP grid path. No, that should be fine. Now let's bring this back in here. Okay. Wow, all of this is in create? That's kind of weird. That is actually really weird. I can get away with all of this in create. Okay, well, we'll see. MP grid path. I have my doubts about this tutorial that they're giving me. It might just be they want to show tracking a target that's not moving, but I don't know. Let's see what this does. Okay, enemy path. Oh yeah, well, I forgot to do that. Since this is now in system, and this is also now in system. Yeah, okay, it's definitely weird. Okie dokie, let's see. Why is all of this in create? That just really makes no sense to me now. Or maybe I do need this whole in enemy. I don't know. Alright, let's go with global. Global. Do it exactly like they're saying and see what happens. This gets weirder and weirder. It just doesn't seem right what's going on, but so I must be completely misunderstanding what these concepts mean in GameMaker. This is definitely going to turn into one of those and awe episodes that I talk about in the intro. But I was expecting it to. These poor guys, they're all wandering off to find Muad'Dib or something off in the desert there. Yeah, there's just something about having all this in Create that just really makes no sense to me. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that tutorial. There's just something off about it. I don't think it's what I'm trying to do. So let's move things back to the way they were before. Let's get rid of all these globals. And then, let's see, add instances. See, the player's position changes. I don't know, it's just like I really want to know how this MP grid path function works, but there's no documentation on how it actually works. Which is really, really annoying. Let's see what this says. Note that the path is independent of the current instance. It is a path through the grid, not a path for a specific instance, which is probably the mistake I'm making in my head, because when I think of path, I think of, you know, the path from this cowboy to the player or whatever, and obviously that's not what I need to be doing. Um, But it doesn't give me enough explanation to really understand how to do that in my case. I guess I should do div 32, actually. That is actually a good point. Or div 24. That's one good point at least. Add instances object wall false with object enemy. With object enemy. Path equals path add, which is what I want to do for each enemy. If MP grid path, if there is a path from the enemy to the player, and path start, but once again, they don't show where this code is supposed to go, whether it's supposed to be in create, or whether it's supposed to be in step, or whether it's supposed to be in the system. The tutorials are all just off, unfortunately, making this much more tricky than it needs to be. If I don't solve this episode, what I probably will do is just grab one of those download tutorials and see how they're doing it, because just knowing where this code is supposed to go is what I'm most interested in, because I know what it's doing, but just where is this going? Is it in create or is it in step? It must be create. But what's confusing to me is, like, the way I'm thinking about it in my head is, it's like you've got a player here and an enemy here. And when I think about it, I think of calculating a path as the player's here, the enemy's here, there are so these obstacles along the way, so this is your path. And then when the enemy, next step, when the enemy moves and the player moves, then that path changes, so you have to recalculate that. That's what's going on in my head. Now, in terms of what GameMaker is doing, I don't know if GameMaker is doing everything behind the scenes, so that once you say, follow this path, it does all the work of recalculating it as things move around. You know, that could be the case. Unfortunately, they don't really explicitly say what they're doing, and they don't tell me whether this should be going into create or step functions. Path start. All right, let's just look this up. All right, I'll go with the Japanese wiki since I can read Japanese. Well, that's fine. Whatever. Path start. Let's see. So it says path slash hudio suru, which means in the path. Yeah, I did all that stuff. Yeah, once again, they don't explain where this stuff goes. How do I keep my enemy object moving? Wow. That's one problem with using Google over here in Japan, is that I get a lot of Japanese pages. Yeah, I get it. You're offering it in Japanese? I just want google.com. Thank you. Okay. Game maker. Path start. Not working. Okay, let's try that. I will change that actually. So let's change that first, because I think that's causing one of the problems. I don't think it's causing the problem. And that's not a global anymore, so let's get rid of that. Alright, I'm going to move path start out into create and see what happens. I think all it's going to do is have the enemy move towards some off-screen thing, but let's just see what it does. Yeah, see, that's more or less what I expected. The enemy seems really, really confused here. It's interesting. Let's change this back to 0. Yeah, see, they're doing exactly what I expected in my mind, which is, if you only use that path function in create, which is why that tutorial kind of screwed up my thinking a little bit. It's like, alright, because path start, this whole MP grid path is going to take where the player is at that moment. It's not going to keep tracking it, so that doesn't make any sense to have all that stuff in create. So that tutorial was really, really confusing. Like, why would you want to create some fancy pathfinding problem for something that doesn't move? So this should at least update them to search for the player. Unfortunately, they're still going right through the barrels and each other, so they're completely ignoring all of that. It's just having trouble with these. What else is going wrong here? Okay, let's move this back out of enemy, because that's not right to have that there, as I expected. 1. Let's get it back in here. So I think when I first started, I think I was closer. Oop, what did that do? System.runGrid. Because you have to create the path every step because it changes. And you have to tell the enemy to get off their current path and go on that path for the next step. Maybe there's just too much calculation going on. That could be why they're stopping partway through. Yeah, now they're just confused and going off somewhere. One of them just did anyway. Wow, okay, this is obviously not a problem I'm going to be solving this episode. It's something I am just going to have to look up further. But on the bright side, the enemy is moving. Okay, so path starts in create for this person anyway that's having problems, so I shouldn't, emulate it too much. But what they're doing anyway is to start the path, they're putting it into create, they're stepping, they're ending the path in the step. That's really weird. They're starting the path inside of the step as well. Oh, this is when they end the path. They get to the end of the path. Source code's kind of all over the place. Let's see. Yeah, that's a different problem. And this is for when you actually just predefine paths, which is not what we're doing. Okay, well, it's unfortunate that I wasn't able to figure out the debugging thing. As is always the case in game development, it takes 5 minutes to get something working, takes an hour to get it working properly. So even though I had much more luck than I expected getting them to start moving, now they're just kind of ignoring these barrels, which is what I need to figure out. For some reason, even though I'm using the MP path add instance thing, and on top of that, it does look like the grid is fine. It's just the way they're using the grid that seems to be off. Because, I'll do that one more time here. Let's grid draw. And what was it? Grid or something like that. MP grid draw. MP grid draw. MP grid draw. Well, I know how it works, so let's just put it in here. And then what was it? System grid. For those of you guys out there watching this later on YouTube, maybe you know the answer and you're just screaming it out. If you do, then yeah, feel free to leave a comment. In the meantime, of course, I'll figure out how it's working in other people's projects and things like that. But looking at this right now, for example, this is the grid. Those red areas are places where the enemy can't go. So that's fine. I know one problem that I see with this is that because that MP grid is in the create function, it only creates those hotspots once. So I do need to change that at least. Let's fix that first. So all of these add instances need to be pulled out, and that's actually another thing I need to fix too. I need to jump back to that game maker thing. MP grid destroy. I do need to clear all of these spaces if I'm going to be adding instances again. That was one of the problems I was having when I had the drawing thing before. You saw where the cowboys were moving and they were leaving these this red trail behind. That's because I kept adding instances to the grid of where they couldn't go, but I wasn't actually clearing the grid at any point. So that's at least one problem that I managed to figure out before the show ended. Let's see. I'm using one of these wrong. Once again, it jumps me to line 2, but the actual problem is with line 1. Oh yeah, well obviously I need to actually say what I'm clearing. So room system dot room grid. Silly me. All right. Yep. Now, unfortunately, everything is up for grabs. Because this should not be in here, actually. Now I'm starting to get an idea for where my problems are lying, but that actually gave me kind of a hint as to where my problem is. I won't be able to solve it this time, but I think it's given me an insight. Enemy path add. Begin step. Execute. Yeah, I'm getting the feeling that I have to do all of that once, and only once. Bad cowboy. Yep. Okay, now I'm starting to get an idea of what's going on. This is something that needs to go into the step of bad cowboy, probably, because there's more than one X and Y. And then I need to pull this out. Yeah, okay, there we go. Now it is updating the grid properly, basically to make sure that it's keeping track of the fact that the player is moving and the enemies are moving, which is a good place to be. So let's turn that debugging thing off. Really wish there was a way to comment this out, but yes. Okay, let's see what it looks like without all of that stuff on the top. Now it's going back to the thing where they're flying off the screen, but I think this is actually closer to where I need to end up. Let's see, enemy path. I feel like I'm close. I feel like I'm close, but I think what it is I'm having a debugging issue where because what they're doing after I made these fixes is weirder than what I had before. I kept trying to, jump back to what I had before, but what's going on now is actually probably closer to where I need it to be in the end. I suspect where my problem is lying is how I'm using the enemy paths, because I have multiple enemy instances, and I think there's something going on in my logic in my head that's making a mistake in terms of how I'm thinking about this, and that needs to change. But obviously, since I'm kind of stuck in that mode of thinking, I probably need to take a break, clear my mind, and then just suddenly when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to go, what was I doing? As it happens, which is why taking breaks is important, and which is why, let's go off on a tangent since we've come to the end of our 2 hours here, but, to come off to a tangent, a lot of studios, game making studios and everything else, they use a lot of crunch, to get things done, which is, for those of you who don't know what the lingo is, crunch time is the cute term they apply to ridiculous amounts of overtime to get a project out the door. Agile is one of those things that tries to avoid crunch, because all you do is, if you're running out of time, you just kind of lower your requirements because you have something working really, really early. So you do have, the bare minimum that you need really early, and then you're just kind of adding value to that as you go. So, where you stop is just a matter of where you stop adding value, which is why Agile is popular, as a development tool, because if you use waterfall, which is once you do A, then you do B, then you do C, then you do D, and then you calculate where your schedule is going to end and all that. The problem with waterfall planning is you create a deadline based on what people think is going to happen, and people always underestimate how things are going to happen. So you almost always end up in a situation where you've only got a little bit of time left to finish the product, and everyone's forced to do overtime, come in on weekends, lose their families, everything else, especially in the game industry. Plenty of stories about it if you want to look them up. I'm not going to say anything because, at least I've been lucky at the places I've worked at, but I've had plenty of friends who are not so lucky in terms of crunch and having their lives kind of ruined by that. But one of the problems with crunch, and one of the reasons you really, really, really want to avoid it, is because you've got people, if they're working 12 hours a day, or, well, 12 hours is small, if they're working 16 hours a day or worse, what they're going to do is they're going to be tired, and usually crunch is when you're trying to fix things, and when you're trying to fix things, it's different from creating things. You need to have a clear mind to fix things properly, because if you're tired, you get stuck on stuff. Worse, you add mistakes in. So when you do rely on crunch to finish a project, it makes things worse. It almost always makes things worse. So you always want to keep adjusting your schedule so that people are well rested, etc. If you're working with a team, if you're working on your own, then at least you only have to manage yourself. But make sure you're rested. Make sure you're not working too hard. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but the more hours you put into something, the less efficient you get. Think about it in terms of school. If you go to a class and you only have it for an hour, it's easy to pay attention. But if you had an 8-hour class or a 12-hour class, or 16-hour class, it'd be really, really, really hard to pay attention and get things right. Crunch works the same way. So if you can, try to set up systems to avoid overtime. But that's a tangent. This obviously, I've only been working for 2 hours, so this is nothing to do with crunch or anything like that. It's just my mind is going in one specific direction, and I need to find someone who's going to tell me, you're thinking about this one thing wrong. Just think about this. And then suddenly my mind will switch onto that track. And it could be me that figures it out, but that'll be my homework for this week, and hopefully next week, once I fix that, I'll get the enemies moving. At least the one good thing is that the enemies are moving, which means that the functions in GameMaker are working as expected and working well enough for the game. So all I have to do is fix the problem, and once I fix the problem, that task is done. Which is actually a really good sign, because I wasn't expecting to get to that point. So I'm going to save where I am now, jump out of that, jump back over to Project Spaghetti in the Trello. I did have action movement set at 2.5 hours. Obviously it's not done, so I'm going to move that over to episode 9. Let me make an episode 9 one here. Which will be next week. And let's see, finding the goal. Actually, in terms of finding goal, that actually worked better than I expected, because the enemy is stopping at a certain distance from the player, and I can adjust that. So that's actually done, because it's not the task that I was expecting it to be. So I did at least get something done. I was kind of worried I'd have just a blank episode 8 sitting there, but this is still in progress. So I'll move that back to episode 9 to worry about next week. In terms of time left on it, do I want to change the estimate here? Nah, probably not. If this was actual Agile, what you would do is you'd probably scratch out that 2.5 and say, all right, now it's 3 or now it's 1 or whatever. But because this is digital and I kind of want to keep track of how much time tasks are taking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 3.5, actually 3. And I'm going to put 2.0 here just to indicate that I've done 2.0 in the past. So theoretically, there's another hour left on this. Next week, probably the first half of the show will be getting this thing fixed. So that is that. You can always go to this Trello.com site anytime you want. The information's down in the Twitch feed, and I also put up annotations in YouTube with the link. So unfortunately, because YouTube doesn't allow direct linking to external sites, you have to manually type it in, but it is public, so you can see it anytime you want to. And I will jump out of that and jump out. But anyway, thank you for watching the show. You can catch us over at YouTube if you missed any of the episodes in the past. That's youtube.com/Tengu Studio. You can also come to our website, which is www.bluetengu.com. Actually, youtube.com/Tengu Studio. I think I said that right. Our website is www.bluetengu.com. You can catch me on Twitter. You can even ask questions on Twitter or make comments on Twitter. That's fine. Tengu. And let's see, where else am I? Facebook.com/Tengu Studio. There's also a Google Plus page, but that's mostly just an announcement page. So if you're on Facebook or Twitter, catch us there. Let's see what else. Next week, you can catch us again. If you're watching this on YouTube, we do this, or I do this every Saturday morning, my time, which is Japan time, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you're in the States, you can come on over to Twitch TV Blue Tengu, 4 p.m. Pacific to 6 p.m. Pacific. So 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 Central, 7 Eastern. If you're in the UK, that's just midnight between Friday and Saturday, so midnight to 2 a.m. on Saturday. If you're in Japan with me, it's 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you're in Australia, I believe it's anywhere from 9 to 11, depending on where you live in Australia. And if you're in New Zealand, it's noon. So definitely check out the live show. We're over on Twitch. And, if you don't check out the live show or you can't make that time, then we are over on youtube.com, where you're probably watching this right now. I do keep adding to that playlist, so you can jump back and forth through episodes as you need to. And that will wrap me up for this show. Sorry I couldn't get the enemy moving properly. I did get them moving, I guess. So I didn't lie on the episode title. I will look into that problem, and I will probably be able to fix it next week, hopefully. And then once that's happening, then the enemy is moving and shooting, and good things are happening, and it becomes more like a game. And thank you for watching. I will see you all next time.